And I can remember him sitting across the table from me at the kitchen. I was drawing a picture for my teacher. And he came over and he took the paper from me and turned it over, and he started drawing a picture of our family. And it was cool because I thought, I didn't know my dad could draw.
Yeah.
But he just started drawing a picture of a dad and a mom and my brother and myself. And then he picked it up and he tore it right in half. And it was just like, and he's like, that's what's happening. So let's start talking about foster care. And I remember listening to my dad call and hearing him leave messages and screaming at the voicemail to just let me come home.
Yeah.
Hey, you can't hear. I just needed. It wasn't any better there. It was just worse. I'd have rather gone home and just taken that. But it was just bad. Met her. I had gotten into a car accident. And I had glass in my hair. My head was all busted open. And her and Dad picked me up from the hospital. And she laid me on her kitchen counter and washed the glass out of my hair. And it was the most selfless thing anybody had done for me.
Well, Adrienne, thank you so much for sitting down with me. First episode was your husband, Mr. Tim, and it was amazing. We tried to go for an hour, went for an hour 20. So we're hoping to be less than an hour 20. He's in the room, so we won't talk too bad about him. He was Army, so he's not paying attention. So, but thankful that you're here for episode number 3 as we explore a life of learning how to trust God, a life of battling addiction and overcoming addiction. And I'm really excited to see how your story really helps and challenges maybe someone that's going through it. And that's the goal of this podcast, is that we would create a database or a place of conversation where those who are struggling with certain issues can come and listen and learn from followers of Jesus who have overcome, because we want anybody to overcome, but really someone who's overcome by the power of God is where true transformation happens. So walk us through that from the beginning to the transformation to now, how God's using you in great ways, and just tell us your story.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm grateful that you asked me, because I knew it was going to be hard, but I feel like that's part of this.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that you asked me. So like essentially from the beginning, I grew up, my parents were separated when we were younger. When I was 3, my brother was 4, and I had several stepmothers along the way, each with their own set of addictions, but all with abuse. So my first stepmother was physical abuse. My second stepmother was physical abuse and drug abuse. And my dad didn't leave them until he would come home and find them doing something.
Yeah.
My second stepmother, he came home and found her hanging me by my foot and kicking me in the face. And it was just like, oh, okay, that's enough.
And how old were you during this time?
6, 7. So it was just like, but it was always something, but it was just like, until it was right in front of his face, it wasn't real enough.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of a lot of neglect on his part. So just kind of kept trucking through. And then I think third stepmother came along, and she was super addicted to drugs, and a majority of our celebrations in that time period were around her getting sober. Like, oh, we're flushing them, and oh, yay. I don't really remember like us celebrating things other than her sobriety, but then her relapse and things like that. And
so that was like a reoccurring thing.
It was a reoccurring thing.
She'd say, all right, I'm committing to this, and she's back. And
it was like, that was a majority of what we went through with her, but it was also physical abuse. Those memories with her are a lot of physical abuse with my brother. I can see him up against the wall, bloody nose, and she's in his face because she just tore him up. And it was just like, it was just always something with her. And she was constantly, it was a lot of violence with her and my dad. It was always something. And I hadn't heard, I was probably about 9 at this point, and I hadn't heard from my mom. I didn't know if, I kind of thought she was dead. So at this point I had, from 3 to 9, it was just all abuse. It was all drugs. It was all violence. It was all neglect. It just was what it was. And that was just the lifestyle I had. I was just used to it. But when around the time I was 9, with that last stepmother, for some reason my dad just kept trying to stick it out. Like, this one's going to work. Like, the third one has to work. I don't know. Like, it's just got to work. You got to give him a chance. I don't know why. He just didn't want to be alone is what it seemed like. He didn't want to be alone, but he just kept trying to make it work. And I can remember him sitting across the table from me at the kitchen. I was drawing a picture for my teacher, and he came over and he took the paper from me and turned it over, and he started drawing a picture of our family. And it was cool because I thought, I didn't know my dad could draw.
Yeah.
But he just started drawing a picture of a dad and a mom and my brother and myself. And then he picked it up and he tore it right in half. And it was just like, and he's like, that's what's happening. So let's start talking about foster care. Like, because I don't think that we can do this anymore. Like, started talking to me about, what do you think, going to foster care, because I can't do this anymore. I need to work on my relationship. And it's like,
so just to clarify, he's telling, you're communicating to you, there's problems in this family, and the answer is getting rid of you.
Yeah. He can't take care of his marriage and support the kids and take care of the kids at the same time. So the answer was separating, and he apparently thought tearing a picture in half was an adequate way to explain to a child what separating a family looks like. Okay, cool. Yeah. But also, what's your thought process on telling a 9-year-old kid, what do you think about foster care? How you feel about that? Yeah. It's like, okay. Well, is my mom still alive? Because maybe I can just go live with her. Part of me thought I would get the answer that, okay, she is dead. She's not here, because I hadn't heard from her. The next day he said, you've got a plane ticket to go see her. She's been alive this whole time.
And had you had questions about that, growing up,
yeah,
especially with having the stepmoms that you had, was that question brought up a lot to them, seeking that?
Not really. I mean, there was no question, but there was no birthday cards. There was no letters. We just didn't talk about her. And she had been gone for so long that it just wasn't part of it. And I feel like for me, my dad was not somebody that I could go talk to and have those conversations with him. So I don't really think we ever had a
dialogue about it.
Yeah.
For me, when my dad passed away when I was young, I remember I don't know, he passed away when I was 3 or 4. And then from age 16 to then, I don't even remember thinking about him, hardly ever. So it's my brain in a way shut it out. So that's why I was curious. Because for me, it wasn't a question to ask, because it's just what it was. And so,
I thought she had to have been dead. If that was his only other option was foster care.
Yeah.
She's got to be dead, Why wouldn't have that been your first choice? Honestly. But for the next day for him to come and I got a ticket for you to go live with your mom.
So it wasn't going to check it out. It was this is where you're going.
You're going to live with your mom. Okay. But I was okay, finally.
How old are you at this point?
9.
So at 9 years old, you're being told through a drawing of a picture that you're the problem and you've got to leave. And within a day's notice, you're on a plane to go live with someone that you, as you're on that way, are you thinking this woman's never reached out to me? Are you terrified, or are you just going?
I was hoping that it would be safe.
Yeah.
The concept of going somewhere where someone would protect me or kind of be on my side, I guess is the best way to say that. I didn't feel like I had anybody on my side. And we were talking about preacher in the thing today, and preacher's your mom would say, yes, and daddy's coming home. It wasn't I got eager at that concept, because he wasn't my safety. He wasn't a safety net for him coming home. It was, one of them would beat the tar out of me and then tell him, well, you better take care of her. And he'd do it just so they wouldn't get mad about it. It's just there was no safety there. So part of me thought, okay, if I go there, it'll be some sort of relief, some sort of safety, like a chance for I can be a kid. I don't know what that means, but I can be a kid. I can start over. And I got there, and my stepfather abused me. And I didn't have words, because it was just oh.
From one broken situation to the next.
I was just the whole world's that's, The whole world is like that. There isn't a safe place to be. There isn't anywhere safe. And I didn't have words. I couldn't tell anybody. There was nobody I could tell. And I remember being so angry and so sad and so scared that all I could do was cry. And my biological mother, I guess she just was frustrated, or she just started beating me with rulers and hairbrushes and like telling me to stop crying. And I remember I was in the shower and my whole side of my body was black and blue. And I had gone into the kitchen to tell her. And my stepfather was at the table and he said, "Oh, I saw it." And he just went to the shower. And it was just like, and she was in there and he was in there. And it's just like, this is normal. I just remember thinking there wasn't anybody that I had that I could go to that was safe. And it was just like, this is just what the world is. The world is just like broken. This. It's just broken. It's just horror. Like, this is just who it is. And, but I cried every day, every night, and I wouldn't come out of the room anymore. And then I got in trouble because I wouldn't come out of the room anymore.
And you're at how old at this point?
I was 9. I only ended up being there for about 4 months.
Oh, wow.
But,
wow. So the abuse started right off the bat.
Right off the bat. And, they, stopped taking me places because I couldn't do anything but cry. I was scared to be around him. I was scared to be around her. I didn't know her. She didn't know me. So they stopped taking me places. They would leave me at home, but they wouldn't leave the phone at home. So I couldn't even call my dad. And back then you had the voicemail or the answering machine. And I remember listening to my dad call and hearing him leave messages and screaming at the voicemail to just let me come home.
Yeah.
And you can't hear. I just needed. It wasn't any better there. It was just worse. I'd have rather gone home and just taken that. But it was just bad.
Yeah.
And by the finally I talked to my dad, and I just said I need to come home. And he said, "I'm not really ready yet." And I couldn't say why. I couldn't say why.
What was it that kept you not wanting to be, like, I guess, forward with the abuse that was happening there? Because you just didn't trust your father to be able to take care of it, or scared of?
No, I didn't trust. I didn't feel like he was going to take care of me. Like, I didn't feel like he was a safe person. Like, I didn't feel like he was safe either. I mean, he kept bringing people into our life that kept this environment around us. And then instead of, I don't know, there was part of me that was like, take me away from this. Like, I didn't know that there was a different type of childhood that I could have had. I didn't know. I thought that was normal. It was horrible, but it was normal. But that was just what it was. I didn't trust him. I didn't trust him to keep me safe, and I didn't trust anybody around me to keep me safe. But I didn't want to be there anymore because that was a different type of abuse, and I just couldn't. Like, I had nobody there. Nobody at all. At least if I was home, I might not have trusted them, but I knew them.
Yeah.
And so by the time I did get to talk to him, and I said, I want to come home, and he said, "I'm not ready for you yet. You can go live with your grandmother." So I was sent to Maine.
So did you have a relationship with her? Did you know her at all, or?
Through birthday cards and things like that.
So very
little. But she was the safest place I'd ever been. She loved me with pancakes and French toast, iced coffee, and she just loved me with food.
Yeah.
And thus enter my eating disorder. Yeah. She did. Her and my aunt is who I lived with in Maine, and they were disabled. They both weighed 600-700 pounds apiece, so they couldn't take me to school, like functions or things like that.
You said 600 or 700 pounds apiece.
So they were homebound, and they definitely didn't need a 9-year-old child, but my dad wasn't ready for me. Yeah. So, but it still was the safest place I'd ever been. Neglectful, but the safest place I'd ever been. But when I got there, I just kind of, I learned how to receive love through food. And that's where I started my eating disorder, was eating, binge eating, just like them. And then shame and guilt coupled with that, which led to binging and purging and like full-blown eating disorder.
Really?
At 9-10 years old.
So this was a daily thing where you would go eat,
binge, purge, restrict, binge, purge, restrict every day, starting at 9 years old.
Now, how did that, so was that like a coping mechanism with what you were dealing with?
Yeah. I mean, like the concept, like that they would love me that way. Like, I don't know that I had ever felt love before. Not like I should have felt.
Yeah.
Because I guess I was looking at love as safety, like it's a coupled thing, like it's all together. And I don't know. I think it might be a grandparent thing. Like, honey, have you eaten anything? Like, you hungry? You know, you look like you're wasting away. Yeah. But then, like, seeing them so overweight and so big, it brought shame to think, well, if I do this and I just, then I'm going to get like that. And it was just coupled. It was just built around shame and guilt. And then, one of my stepmothers previously had been very verbally abusive, and she would call me cochina, which is dirty pig. She was Hispanic, and she was awful to me. And those things like stick with you as the 5-year-old kid. You're gonna call me cochina? Like, it just, like, she was just hateful and cruel to me. And those things just kind of couple. And I was using food as a tool to like love myself, because that's what Mimi did. That's how she loved me. Honey, wake up. French toast is ready. It's like, okay, and I learned how to love myself that way. But I was depressed, and the people I started meeting, well, they smoked pot, and I could kind of escape that way.
Yeah.
And so about 9 years old, and I'm full-blown eating disorder, started smoking pot, started drinking, like it just started smoking cigarettes, like all of it. And
so at 9 and 10, what has given you the access to that? Just the friends that
my grandmother, they couldn't do anything. They were completely homebound. Every once in a blue moon, they'd get out to go see my great grandmother. But it was like literally once a month they got out of the house. So
you had no Overwatch.
There was there was no parenting. There was no nothing. And I was there for about 2 years, a little over 2 years. And I'll say, let me back up. Right about the time before the drugs started, like before I started smoking pot, and I got there after the eating disorder started happening. I think it was like right around the same time. I'm trying to remember which happened first, but I kind of feel like it was all coupled together. But I was watching an episode of 2020 with my grandmother, and it was about a girl who had been abused, and she told. And because she told, it stopped her sisters from being abused too, and they were proud of her, and it wasn't even about her. It was, her sisters were safe. And then it hit me like my mother, my biological mother, has got 2 other girls and 2 other boys there. Like, what's happening there now that I'm gone? I need to tell somebody. It's not even about me, it's about them. Like, because still at this point, I didn't matter. Yeah. Even 2020 taught me, you don't matter. I get that the thought process wasn't that I didn't matter, but
when you say you didn't matter, like you had zero self-esteem, zero self-worth, zero value.
Absolutely not. Like the entire childhood of had taught me, like, no one's really going to come to your aid. You're not that important. So if 2020 could teach me anything, I needed to look at somebody else. If you don't matter, somebody else might. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, I need to tell somebody. So I wrote my dad a letter. At my grandmother's, I wrote my dad a letter, and I said, and I laid it out there, and I said,
could you explain to me what a letter is?
Yeah.
Is that to break it in?
Your little baby.
Yeah, I know.
It's a piece of square. Yeah. It's got lines on it.
I just learned how to put my address on but when I got to Temple. But anyways, sorry. But you wrote your dad a letter.
I wrote him a letter, and I told him what happened, and nothing.
No response?
No response.
Which is indicative of how he was a protector the entire time.
So nothing happened. Nothing came of it. And years passed. Nothing happened. So, the meantime, I've started self-medicating because I am screwed up. I think I am worth nothing. I think that I can trust nobody, and just coping as best I can, essentially. But I feel like, to some degree, thinking I just don't matter. I was so reckless with how I lived. My grandmother was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm not this little kid. Like, I'm no McBrayer.
No put together perfect respect for you.
Yeah, I am no. And there was no church in my life. There was no God in my life. There was nothing. Like, if I could say anything about my family, it was like an atheist kind of thing. We didn't talk bad about God.
Just wasn't
didn't exist. There was no reason for him to be there. And our neighbors, we called them rolling holies because they went to church all the time. And but
so how quickly, with you being at your grandmother's, did the conflict start arising with them? I'm like, okay, I don't know if we could do this either.
So it was kind of like a neglectful conflict. I see where my dad got it from.
Yeah,
it was kind of like a neglectful thing. Like, I can see these things happening. I'm not going to do much to change it other than send you away. So I got sent back to my dad's.
And you're 12, 13?
12 years old.
Oh.
So I went back to my dad, and he was with the same last lady. And it was like the week I came back, my dad ended up going to jail because they got into this huge fight, and I was in my room, and I could hear him screaming and yelling, and then I just heard this huge crash, and I ran out there, and he's on top of her on the bed, and she is fighting, and she's bleeding, and he's bleeding, and the mirror from the dresser is busted, and they just wouldn't stop. And I jumped in the glass to see if it would, like, to get them to stop, like, to just see if they would just make them stop, to distract them.
You like jumped
in the glass.
And they didn't care?
Didn't care. And then they sent my dad to jail because he was the man.
Yeah.
Even though regardless.
Even though there was,
it was pretty obvious that she had started it. It looked to me like he was trying to restrain her. Whatever. It was just a volatile situation, and it just kept being that way. It was broken arms and fights and black eyes, and it was just always something. And it was almost like if there wasn't something going on, something was wrong. It was just always that way. But there was no trust at all, and it just kept going that way. And the drugs got worse, and it honestly didn't matter what I took. I remember when I came home after that, when my dad went to jail, and I jumped in the glass, and they didn't care. It was kind of like, I don't really matter to anybody. And I took a whole bottle of Yellow Jackets. Like, within the next week, I took a whole bottle of Yellow Jackets.
What is that?
It's like an energy pill, but I have AFib, which, like, makes your heart race. It's like so for me to take one of those.
So you were attempting to take your life.
I was like, I thought, you know what, and I remember laying on the couch and just thinking, it's going to finally stop. It's going to finally stop. Not the fighting, and my heart.
Yeah.
My heart would finally stop. And it was just, that was my first attempt. Because I was just like, it's not going to get better. It's just, this is how life is. And then nobody cares. Like, I don't want to be here for this anymore. Like, where else are you going to send me? Like, there's nowhere better. And it just kept on like that. Like, for 13, 14, 15, it kept being like that. He kept trying with the same lady for quite a long time.
And she was living at the house the entire time of the.
Yep. And then
How would he explain what happened? Was that ever explained, or is it just we're back home the next day and we're eating dinner?
he would never. We we didn't do family dinners. We didn't
Talk.
do that.
Yeah.
No. My I feel like the extent of our like hanging out time or like spending time, the last time I can remember us spending time together was when he woke me up in the middle of the night and made me stay awake because I had woken her up during the day when she was sleeping. So he woke me up in the middle of the night as punishment to make me sit up all night. That was how we spent time together. So it was just a very bad relationship, a very screwed up relationship, which wasn't much at all a relationship, but it wasn't safe. And I wouldn't say he was physically abusive to me. He was just super neglectful.
Yeah.
And the entire way.
Which is abuse, you know?
Yeah.
Because part of the father's job is to create an environment for his children to thrive in.
Yeah.
And so now, was he like working a full-time job, like from the outside looking in? No one would have suspected, or?
Oh yeah. I genuinely think that he thought they are fed and clothed and alive. I'm doing good.
And you know, without God or without Christ, without the hope of heaven and what it means to follow Jesus, like that is the standard.
Oh yeah.
If people want to take God out of things, but you take God out of things, and that is, you have no goal, you have no standard to aspire to be.
Yeah, there was nothing.
This is it. We're supposed to, if they're alive, then they're good. Like,
yeah. Uh-huh. You know, when I was 16, I finally, my new stepmother, which actually they didn't get married. She wouldn't marry him because he had gone through so many.
It's like, this is not good.
Yeah. But she was the first person, her name was Louise, and she was actually the first person to come into my life and that was selfless to me.
Yeah.
The day I met her, I had gotten into a car accident and I had glass in my hair. My head was all busted open, and her and Dad picked me up from the hospital, and she laid me on her kitchen counter and washed the glass out of my hair. And it was the most selfless thing anybody had done for me. Like,
someone took time to take care of you. Yeah.
I was 16. It took that long. Like, it just took it. She's gone now. But, I used to think for a long time she was the only thing that woke my dad up, and, but I know that God put her in our life for me. I needed her. And, she didn't jump in and try to be my mom. She didn't jump in and try to be my friend. She just was a good role model. And she taught me how to be a mom and a woman and all the things that I should have already known by then. But I was kind of already too far gone.
Yeah.
So
how did your dad end up going from that horrible of women to this woman?
He was trying to date her daughter-in-law. Yeah. He was trying to date her daughter-in-law.
And ended up getting
And she was married. And she was like, sorry, I'm taken. But my mother-in-law is single.
It's like, sure. While we're here.
And he just couldn't be alone. He just could not be alone. And it was just like, it didn't matter. It didn't matter.
Which it's so, you start like in my head, I'm dissecting the story, and he didn't want to be alone. So it means like he craved some sort of comfort in relationship.
Oh,
yet could not see his own child needed that.
But
it's just blindness.
Oh yeah. When I meeting her, and she came in and she taught him how to budget. She taught him how to get out of debt. She taught him how to, function like a parent, how to discipline, how to do those things. By that time, we were not prepared to receive the discipline. Like, sorry, now you want to be a parent? Oh, thank you.
We have the the history to look back upon.
Yeah. No, thank you. And my brother, I was 16, he was 17. So he was already run away, and he was actually in Maine at that point. Part of me thought that he had gone to avenge me, because he went and he didn't. He didn't. Because actually, when I turned 18, I found out that nobody had believed me.
Really?
And my dad did get the letter, and I actually got a call from my aunt out of the blue one day. My grandmother had already passed away, and she said, "Hey, you remember that thing that you said happened to you when you lived here?" Well, I had never told her. I had only told my dad. I had only written to my dad.
Oh, so you never told your grandmother either?
I had only written to my dad. And I said, yeah. And she said, "Well, did it really happen?" I'm like, yeah. Like, did it really happen? Like, oh, that's why nothing happened.
Yeah.
Nobody believed me.
Yeah. Nobody
believed me. And it turned out that a detective had gotten hold of them because it turned out he had done it to every single girl, cousin, niece, every female that ever walked into my biological mother's house. He had done it to them, except one sister. I don't know why one.
Yeah.
But every single one. And they only contacted them because of me, because I lived there for a period of time, not because anybody had reached out to them. I remember asking my dad, what did you do when you got my letter? What did you say? Like, what did you do? Well, he said, "I can't remember." I'm over here like, I can't forget. You can't remember?
Because that was like a really pivotal moment for you too.
Oh, I was jumping on the glass all over again.
Yeah.
Nobody was paying attention. I just, like, it just hit me like, I just felt like my whole life I was searching for somebody to trust and somebody to believe in me. And it just, once again, it just, another slap in the face that I couldn't rely on anybody. It didn't matter how close they were. It didn't matter how much I knew them. I just didn't have anybody I could rely on. And,
no one to rely on to really to believe that they have your best interests at heart, or that you're even a thought in their brain.
No, I mean, could you imagine your child even saying that? Even if they weren't being honest, would you
go to the ends of the earth to seek the justice?
Just to even ask them a question. I mean, I'm whatever.
It's speechless because you don't have words to describe that level of evil. That's what it is. Like, we like to put clean words on it, but it's evil in its purest form, that a vulnerable child, a daughter, would be abused and then come forward with it and not even have the courage to look into it. That blindness is only covered by sin and evil and Satan itself. Like, that's the epitome of the destruction of the soul. Is that I cried out for help and no one heard.
No one heard. Yeah, it's like. So when I look back and I think my brother went to go live with her, and they refused him. It doesn't make me wonder now. And my brother's this big burly guy. He's got piercings and tattoos all over his face. Of course, he was 17, but that didn't stop anything. We started young. We started very young, and I have to wonder if my stepfather thought the same thing. Like, if he thought he was there to get back at him or something, because they would not let him stay there. But honestly, looking back, and I'd asked my brother after that, like, I thought you went there to get back at him for me. Like, after the whole court case had come out, and he ended up going to jail. He ended up doing
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I mean, it was 8 years later, and it was just like, and how many people later, how many girls later? Like, how many? It hurt me. It hurt me, yes, because you ignored me. But then I even tried to put myself aside. Like, what about everybody else? Okay, if I don't matter, what about everybody else? But that wasn't even
checked into.
Yeah. Like, so suicide attempt number 2. I took a whole box of pseudoephedrine. The whole box. And I still didn't die.
Did you have to go to the hospital or anything? Or
I didn't. I probably shouldn't have. But I was passed out in the back of a car, and I just remember waking up and seeing seagulls. And I'd just black out and wake up, seagulls. That's all I remember. I don't remember anything else. I don't know how long I was in the back of a car. Nobody knew.
Damn.
There's so many times I just should be dead by now. I just should be. And that's how I know that, God's using my story and God's using me.
Yeah.
Is because I shouldn't be right. It shouldn't be here right now. But I just kept trying. And if the intentional attempts weren't working, I lived like I didn't care.
Yeah.
Like I lived reckless and horrible, and like I looked for, I put myself in so many positions that I was raped, I was taken advantage of, I was, just so many positions where I just shouldn't be here right now, or I should be in jail. Like I just shouldn't be here right now. And
the driving force behind putting you in those positions was not understanding that you had any value, and secondly, that even at your attempt to do anything good in your life, it was neglected. And like did that going forward, and then nothing happening, and all those other girls getting hurt, did that like lead into like a purposeless, like if I can't even speak up and help, so that really the absence of hope and purpose puts you in these perpetual situations.
Yeah, it was just like the world is evil and I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here because I felt like I was the football getting kicked around, like I was the brunt of it. And I know I wasn't the only one. I know this was happening to a lot of people, but in my world, I was the only one, and I felt alone, and I didn't have a genuine friend. That I look at now, and Tori, she's the first friend I've had, my first best friend.
Yeah, someone who cares about you and wants nothing in return.
Unconditional.
Yeah,
like I've had friends before, but when I got sober, well, they're not here anymore. So there was probably something attached to those friends.
Yeah.
It just, when my life changed, when I finally decided, okay.
Take us there.
So 18 was that failed attempt, but I still, I can't do it intentionally. I'm going to do it however it happens, it happens. And about 20 years old, I decided I was done. Like I was going to cut my wrists. Like if pills wouldn't do it, this was going to happen. And somebody came to my door. I had the razor blade in my hand, and somebody came to my door and stopped me. Just came to my door, and it was just a distraction, but it was enough in that moment to stop that. But okay. I met my son's father. I got pregnant, and I was still living horrible addict. When people ask me what my drug of choice was,
it's like whatever's available.
Whatever it was. I didn't have a drug of choice. It was whatever made me feel numb, because feeling hurt a lot. And so it was just kind of like whatever it was. My entire pregnancy, I was high.
Really?
And I thought I was doing good because I wasn't taking pills, or I hadn't been taking shrooms, or I hadn't rolled. Like I hadn't taken any ecstasy, or, but I thought I was doing good. But who knows what was, I know that there was some stuff in that pot that I smoked, and and the stuff I was drinking. And it just was not good.
Yeah.
And Elliot was born, and I remember waking up one day, and he was about almost a year old, and he was walking around the house, and he had cut his finger on a beer can that was just on the floor. And I I don't know, it was just something in me that was like, I have to care about him. Like, I have to care about what is going on with him. Like, I have to care about him. Like, nobody cared about me. I have to. And it's like that switch just flipped, and like, I have to do this. And I remember talking to his dad, and I was like, I want to get sober. I want to do this. We got to get clean. And he was like, oh yeah, it's a great idea. Let's do this. And it's like, let's break all our pipes. Let's get sober. And he's like, yeah, that's great. After we smoke this.
One more time.
And oh, by the way, somebody gave us, a couple, and it was never, there wasn't really an end to it. And, but I was done. But the more I stayed with him, there wasn't an end to it. And,
so at this point you were ceasing, you were trying to get sober, and he's still,
I had the mindset to get sober.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to do that. And I had voiced it to him, but there was no support there. He was just like, yeah, sure. Yeah.
But we'll do it next week.
Yeah, next week. Exactly. And that was just not happening. And I'm like, the only thing that's going to do this is we got to get away from this. And I thought, we'll move. Let's move. Well, he couldn't keep a job for nothing. So I thought, wherever we go, I'm going to have to support us.
Yeah.
I knew this already. So I started looking up debt to income ratios, which is how I found Alabama. Alabama was first.
And you were where at?
In Florida.
In Florida? Okay.
I was born in Maine, moved all over the country, back and forth, getting tossed around. And Dad moved us. I ended up in Florida at that point. I hated Florida.
That hurts me. Love it.
Florida's for the newlywed and nearly dead.
I was newlywed when I lived there, so makes sense.
Yeah. But I remember looking and just trying to find somewhere where I felt like I could afford to live on my own, because I could not afford to live in Florida on my own. And, but also I felt like I needed to get away from everybody that thought that the way we were living was okay, because it wasn't just him. It was all of the friends that stopped by and, oh, well, I'm not buying right now because we're trying to get clean. Oh, well, that's okay. It's on me this time. Yeah. Oh, it's okay. I've just got these couple extra.
Yeah.
It was just never enough. Like it was always something. And so it was just like, what in me, it was, I got to get away from this. That was what I knew. And so debt to income ratio, Alabama, first on the list. I went to my dad and I said, I'm moving it to Alabama, and I'm moving to Florence because it's probably as close to Italy as I'll ever get. Because I'm Italian. And I thought that's as close to Italy as I'll ever get.
Listen, there ain't one Italian in Alabama.
Well, that was my thought process. Yeah. So I go to tell him, and Louise is there, and she says, I have family in Alabama, in Harvest. I'll see if you can go stay with them. Okay. And like a month later, she's talked to her sister, and her sister said, absolutely, I can come stay with you. And so I went with Louise, just her and I, and Elliot, of course, and he was a little over 1. And we came up to Alabama, and I was looking around and getting applications and stuff and just trying to figure it out. Like, I could come stay with her sister for a minute while I came up here, but I had to obviously get my own place. Yeah. And
that was your husband, or did you marry this? So is he coming with you, or?
That was the thought process was there. Yeah. At that time, we had both worked at the same place. We both worked at the Wendy's down there. And so I came up to Alabama, and I was looking around. He was going to stay back and work while I was gone. He was, he'll stay back and work. Okay. Well, I'm up here and looking around for a place and calling, and he's not answering. I'm thinking he's at work. So I called work to check in on him, and the manager had answered, and he said, oh, well, I thought he was up there with you. And he took the whole week off to go up there with you, right?
Okay.
No, he didn't. So, no, he's not here with me.
This can't be good.
No, not at all. When I got home after that week of being gone, my house was trashed, corner to corner. Like, they had partied hard, and there was some girl's clothes on the floor in the computer room. And I said, I'm leaving.
That was your son's.
I'm just leaving. I'm done. I'm leaving. I'm done.
Which I'm thankful that you were able to make that realization, because I feel like some people, when their experience is no one has valued me, no one has cared for me, no one has fought for me, they don't even have the self-awareness enough to be like, I got to leave this because it's not good for me. Would you say the having your son help frame that mindset of, okay, I've got to get out of here because
I have
I've got
to protect
it's
it.
more than me.
I knew that I should have been protected. I knew that somebody should have stood up for me along the way, and I knew that nobody didn't. I knew that was what went wrong. I knew that there was wrong things in the world. Like, not everybody was wonderful.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the way, somebody should have stood up for me and said, I'm going to protect you. And if nobody was going to do that for me, I was going to do it for him. And it just
Beautiful.
like, well, when I told his father that I was leaving, he got angry and he said, that's fine, you're replaceable anyway.
So no, you don't
Where's
understand.
that cherry? Let's just put a cherry on.
I'm so sorry though.
That was just normal for me. And I was searching change. I was searching for safety for my son. And I just knew I needed to start over and get away from everything and everyone that knew who I was, knew the crap that I had gone through, knew everything. Because it wasn't just everything that was happening to me, because I was giving it back right away. I was putting myself in positions I didn't need to be in. I was stealing from, things. I was doing drugs. I was doing all the wrong things as well. I was reckless. And they all knew who I was. And it was just like, there was no opportunity for growth there. Like, you want to get clean? Sure you do. And I just knew I needed to get away from that. So I thought, if I go to Alabama, nobody knows me. Fresh start. Good chance. People can assume that I'm good. People can assume that I've had a wonderful life.
Yeah.
And that I'm normal. I could be good.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how. I didn't know how to do that. So when I got to Alabama, I was still all of those things and then lonely on top of it. And I didn't know how to get sober, but I knew how to find drugs. I knew how to numb myself and kind of just keep functioning. I just thought that staying away from people was my best option. And actually, when I met Tim, okay, so I've already got a son.
Yep.
Okay, we're just going to cover that basis. I've already got a son, but I've never been on a date. Okay?
Okay.
There was no, I was free reign. Like, there was no, anyway. But when I met Tim, he was not, he wouldn't make a move on me. He wouldn't try to kiss me.
So we said hello.
Yeah.
There's something supposed to be
yeah,
happening
exactly.
already.
Like, we had discovered, like, when I met Tim at my job, our first conversation, like our first real conversation, we had discovered he had lived in Maine the same time I had lived in Maine.
So when I was interviewing him and he was telling me about that, I was like,
Yeah.
the fact that he was in Florida.
Mm-hmm. So within a month of each
That
other,
was
like,
blowing my
my
mind.
stalker. Like,
Yeah. I've been chasing after you for a while.
yeah. And then we finally meet here, and it's just like, okay. But he hadn't tried anything with me, and I'm like, something's wrong with this fella. Something's wrong. I'm going to get him to hold my hand. I'm going to get, what are you doing this weekend? And he had told me he was going to church, and I was like, okay, can I come? Like, he was going with his daughter, and I was kind of like, is that a daddy-daughter thing? Is that like something you do, as family? He's like, no, you can absolutely come. Sure.
It's kind of the purpose. We actually like inviting people to this thing.
And I don't think I was necessarily, I gave off the invite me to church vibe. I definitely cussed like a sailor. I smoked. I still did drugs very frequently, drank. Like, that was just who I still was, which is weird because we look back at it now, and usually as a recovering anything, you don't go around people who are in addiction. Like, that's one of the things. Like, you try not to.
Yeah.
Especially if you're trying to stay clean. And he was still so fresh into it that it was just like, it's like God put blinders on. That's all it is. God put blinders on. And, but anyway, I invited myself to church, and being in church, and he would not hold my hand because he was too busy crying.
Just sobbing.
And I was like, well, this is not going to happen. And so I started paying attention to preacher, and preacher said, you say you want things different, and you do all these things to change and all these elaborate things, but nothing's working and everything's still falling apart. And it's because you're doing it without God. So why don't you give it a shot? And
so is this the first experience of God, first understanding of church, or even the message of the gospel?
Absolutely. Church was for funerals and weddings.
Yeah.
And those were limited. Like I honestly had asked him if he had been talking about me. And
because it was so directly.
Because it was so direct to me. And he was like, nope. And it wasn't that day, but it made me come back. Like, okay, all right, now that I know, okay, I'm doing it wrong. Maybe next time they'll tell me what to do.
Yes.
And I did. I came back the next Sunday, and I don't remember the next Sunday's message, but it was super similar to, you're going to keep falling apart without God. Like, that's just it in a nutshell. If you try to keep doing this without God, it's not going to work. It's never going to work. And I remember going down to the altar, and they would come up to you. I don't think they really do it this way anymore, but they'd come up and they'd say, what do you need God to do for you? And I was sobbing. And I remember just saying everything. That was all I could get out. Everything. Because that's what I needed. I needed him to change everything. I needed everything in my life changed, and I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know who he was. I'd never heard anything about him. I didn't know the concept of salvation, of forgiveness, of
lordship, of
anything. Nothing. It was so foreign to me. But I just knew I needed a change, and that nothing I was doing was working. And I couldn't even get out.
Yeah.
Like, if I was going to be here, might as well try something different.
Yeah.
And
I think that's all you needed to know, though.
Yeah, it was.
God can meet you there.
About 9 weeks in a row, I was at the altar. I don't know if you heard me. I don't know how this works, but I really do want to change. Like, I was at the altar every Sunday, like, just in case you didn't hear me. I mean, I know it's not how it works now.
Yeah.
I know now, but I didn't understand the concept of all you gotta do is ask once. But when I say fervent, I was fervent. And
Right.
And my sobriety didn't start overnight. It didn't change overnight, but it also wasn't enough to just get sober. It wasn't enough to just stop doing the drugs. I did stop eventually. I remember calling Tim and saying, I haven't smoked or done anything in about a week. And he was like, man, that's cool. I'm proud of you. And I was like, I'm proud of me too.
Yeah.
Like, to have somebody proud of me, and then for people in church to start learning a little bit about what I had just come from. I mean, I had tattoos, I had piercings, like, they knew something was different, and they'd start asking me my story, and I would not go in depth because I didn't want to be that person anymore. I just glaze over it, and I just say I just coming out of addiction. And it was a very long time before I ever touched on what brought me to that self-medicating.
Yeah.
But even when they learned that part, they still loved me. That was more foreign than anything I had ever known. Like,
I mean, you couldn't get someone to care about you if your arm was bleeding, and now you're bearing the darkest, deepest hurts, and people are looking at you like, well, that, your past wasn't the reason why I loved you anyways.
yeah, exactly.
Like, the loving is called higher to a purpose given by God, not necessarily who or what you can bring to the table.
Exactly. And it was just like, the more I shared, the more people loved me. The more broken I was, the more mercy God gave me. And it was wrapped in his love and his forgiveness. And then I started learning what it looked like to forgive other people. and then to forgive myself. And that was a strange concept. Like, it just learning how to love him. I think I told you this, like learning how to love him and learning what it meant to like live in this life that he had created for me. That I've never craved anything like I craved that. Like, oh man, I get to do that again today. Like, well, I'm so glad it didn't work.
I get to pursue. I mean, what was difficult about forgiving yourself?
A lot was difficult because I felt like a lot of it was my fault. I felt like not that it had been taught to me, but I felt like the reason nobody protected me was because I deserved it. I felt like the reason it kept happening was because I was asking for it. Well, if I hadn't put myself in that position, I would have never, gotten raped. If I hadn't put myself in that position, I would have never gotten taken advantage of. And, if I shouldn't have worn those tights, or I shouldn't have, worn pigtails that day, or, my whole life had taught me that, or not taught me, but I just looked at it like it was my fault. Probably mostly because nobody stood up for me and said, that's not okay. That's not right. Somebody was wrong there. I just looked at it as I was probably wrong. I feel like to some degree I still do that today. I'm actually currently in trauma therapy.
It's an ongoing thing.
It's an ongoing thing. It is an ongoing thing. I didn't know I needed trauma therapy. But it turns out I am very good at disassociating. And it became really easy to turn my feelings off because feeling hurt. And when I stopped being able to use drugs and stopped being, the funny thing about drugs is while it numbs pain, it also numbs joy.
Yeah.
In order to feel God's joy and God's love, sometimes you got to feel pain.
That's exactly what Scripture says.
Yeah.
Especially Romans 5 talks about how our pain, or our sufferings lead to endurance, character, hope.
Yeah.
And the epitome of hope is the fullness of joy in heaven. So you can't have hope and joy in heaven without the presence of suffering. In fact, that's exactly what Jesus on the cross, it was what suffering of the perfect Lamb of God is what brought endless joy to the world.
Yeah.
It's almost tied together. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really hard. But disassociating is what I started to do to all the pain, though. Like, so instead of dealing with it, I was just like, I'm just going to shut that off. Don't worry, that didn't hurt. Oh, you were just mean to me? That's fine. I'll just shut it off. I'm just going to focus on the joy.
Yeah, it's hard to stay in the moment when every time you've hurt and you went for help, it was ignored.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, it's kind of like a trained muscle, not only just the disassociation, the psychological part, but like it was told to you, like, I'm not going to listen to you. So if no one's going to listen to my pain, why should I feel it myself?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I noticed when I decided trauma therapy was something that I needed was when I noticed I was doing it to other people. When they would come to me, and like in our job, people come to us all the time. Like working at the church, it's just like counsel is just something that we do. And people would come to us and they'd be like, man, this is hard right now. And I'd be like, that's okay. There's a silver lining. Like, maybe they need to hear it.
Maybe they need to sit in their pain
hard.
too. Yeah.
That's hard. And nobody ever did that to me. So I just kind of taught myself, hey, you don't need to sit in that. There's no point in wasting time on that. That's why I tell Tim all the time. There's no point in being mad. There's no point in wasting time on that. There's no point in wasting your energy on being sad or mad. Just focus on joy. But that's not right.
It's not real.
It's not real. Like,
and you can't adjust anything, change anything, move any needle in your life if you can't wrestle with the emotions you currently feel.
Yeah.
Because that is the indicators that something's up. That's the God-given, meter that tells us injustice is present.
Yeah.
I've got to correct. But the enemy wants us to shut things down. That's why he says he keeps it in the darkness, and then God brings them to light. Like you hide in the darkness, you bring the emotion to the light with the gospel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was forgiveness. What got you to the point? because you were saying, like, I couldn't get to the point where I realized it wasn't my fault. When one thing that popped into my head was, God gives people forgiveness to the people it was their fault too.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like forgiveness is, I don't even have to get to the point. I don't have to, it's okay if I was the cause.
Yeah.
Because he forgave me that sin, And there are probably things, your environment dictated your actions in a lot of ways, but we still had the choice even with our environment. Yet Christ knew we were doing that, and he died for us anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's probably the most freedom as far as I found in true forgiveness.
There's that's something I've worked on with my dad over the years. I feel like our relationship right now is better than it ever has been, probably because I've been able to be verbal about feeling hurt along the way, the things that I went through, not always in detail about the things that I went through, but definitely in the ways that I feel like he neglected. I'm hesitant sometimes about it because I don't want him to feel like I'm, like, oh, and this happened to me and this happened to me. It's all your fault. But mostly, in a way, the conversations that we've had are like, I know that it was bad, and I know that your intentions weren't for it to be that way. And you probably thought that you were doing all right, but it's okay. Like, we don't live there anymore, and we're just going to move forward. In fact, my birth mother, I reconnected with her, I guess about 5 or 6 years ago. My half sister, the one, reached out to me and asked me to come up there for a surprise birthday party for her 60th birthday.
It's a hard ask.
And I was just like, before that, the only conversation I'd had with her was probably 6 years earlier when I found them on Facebook, because I hadn't talked to them after 9 when I left. I hadn't talked to them at all. And around 20 years old, I had found my half-sister on Facebook. What was it?
MySpace?
MySpace, yes. MySpace.
See, I'm old enough.
See, there you go. You don't even know what that is.
I was old enough to read about it in the textbook.
Yeah, I found my half-sister on MySpace, and my birth mother sent me an email and said, I just want you to know that he wants you to forgive him. He's in jail. She was still married to him, and she wanted me to forgive him. I didn't know God at this point. I was just like, you're crazy. And do you know what he did with all your daughters? You're crazy. Nope. No, don't call me. Nothing. I don't want to have anything to do with you. Well, I guess she ended up leaving him after I sent that, like, oh, I don't know. Was I the first one to call you out? Whatever.
So she ended up leaving him after the interaction?
After I sent her an email and said, you're crazy. Do you know what he's done to me and every single one of your daughters and every single niece that has walked in that house? Like, you're crazy. I don't want to have anything to do with you if you think that's okay. Like,
which was righteous.
Yeah.
Like, that's like, it's a good thing to do.
And, but anyway, so a couple years ago when she had asked me if I would come up there and surprise her for her 60th birthday, my first initial was no. Nay.
Never.
And I was super convicted. And God was like, oh, really? Because I thought you forgave her. Like, and I mean, I had forgiven her to him. To him, but not to her. She didn't need to know about it.
Yeah.
She didn't need to go there. And I was just really convicted about it. And I just felt like I needed to show that forgiveness. Like, if I'm going to show forgiveness, then I'm going to show forgiveness. And I went. And I went up there and we talked, and she apologized and apologized and apologized. I didn't realize, and I thought I had to stay with him, and I thought, I was doing the right thing and giving him a second chance, and like all these things. I thought I did the right thing. I thought I was doing the right. I thought. And it's like, okay, well, we can all think ourselves to death, but it doesn't matter. Like, it's done. And we ended up getting matching tattoos
with your mom,
on my biological mom and my half sister, and it says forgive, and it's a verb.
Wow.
to say that forgiveness is in action. Like that's an action that we're going to do. It's not just going to be something that
I can't mentally I can't throw it out in the universe, but
yeah,
I actually have to lead with the way I live my life towards it.
Yeah. And that means like, I might not like wait, she had said, I don't know how to be your mom anymore. I'm like, I feel like that ship has sailed.
Let's just start.
Yeah. I feel like that ship has sailed, but if you want to call me and we can be friends or we can be cordial and get to know each other and you want to learn about my life and who I am and my son and your grandson, like I'm open to that. Like going forward, I'm up for it. Let's do that. Because we can't get back the past. That's what forgiveness looks like for her and I, is moving forward. And I'm absolutely open to that. And it's opportunities like that throughout my life that, now there are some that are a little harder than others. Like when I accidentally got a friend request from my stepfather on Facebook. Pretty sure that was an accident. And I blocked it real quick. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that yet. Sometimes forgiveness looks like I'm not going to carry the weight of that anymore.
Yeah, and I heard a guy say this, that forgiveness with Christ looks like us repenting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We have to turn away from before we get the forgiveness.
Yeah.
And even with those that have abused us and hurt us, we're called to let it go. Mm-hmm. But forgiveness comes with repentance. Like you have no... Christ doesn't say go get into the lives of the people that's hurt you the deepest.
Yeah.
If it came to a point where there was repentance there, then maybe, but you can find freedom there too. So as we're getting close to wrapping this up and we come to a pivotal point in your story of you coming to the altar over and over and over, crying out and seeking and just chasing after God. You mentioned that you had struggled with trusting God. So with the fact that you had no father that would take care of you, no stepfather that would do anything remotely to take care. Your mom was neglectful. Your grandmother was neglectful. Anybody that was put in your life to be a force of love and security had abandoned you. How did that impact your relationship with God in the beginning?
It was really hard, even to the point of like when Tim and I got married, I feel like I even put more trust in him than I put in God.
Yeah.
And it was very quickly that God when Tim relapsed, it was almost like an area for God to say, no, me.
An idol to take down.
Yeah. Like, no, me. I'm the one that's not going to leave you. And in that moment, God provided our finances the entire time Tim was gone. Every single thing that we needed the entire time Tim was gone, God provided. Whether it was people showing up and just dropping it off. I remember walking into the church and just going to the altar in the middle of the week. Back then they used to keep the lights off like during the week. And I'm at the altar and I'm laying it out there, and Tammy and Preacher were there, and they just walked up, gave me a check for $400, and it was what I had just prayed for to pay our car payment. It was like I needed gas money to get Elliot to a doctor's appointment, and somebody handed us a check for $50. It was just, God just showed up. It was so much more than just financial, though. It was just like, when I felt like I'm just gonna give up, it was somebody calling me to say, I love you. I'm praying for you. I kept trying to go get drunk. I kept trying. If Tim can relapse, I can relapse. I didn't know Coleman was a dry. I didn't know that was a thing. I grew up in Florida. Nothing's dry in Florida. Yeah. It rains every day at 4. Like, I went from every single gas station to grocery store. I was all the way in Hartselle, where there's that Kroger's. I don't even know. I didn't even know where it was. I was really far. I was just looking. I was going to get drunk. And I ran into a Coleman church member there. And she said, hey, Adrienne, what are you doing? It was the one who was there when I got saved. Prayed with me the day I got saved. Hey, Adrienne, what are you doing out here? I've got tomato juice in the cart. I'm just waiting for vodka to fall in there. Turns out they were dry too. Like, it wasn't there.
That's wild that you're looking for that, can't find it, then you find the person that led you to the Lord. It's like,
It was just God just kept showing up. I'm gonna be there for you. I'm gonna show up for you. And through the restoration of Tim and my marriage, everything, God just kept showing up. And it was just like I had to learn how to trust him. And even it wasn't people. It was never going to be people. I had to learn that this world is corrupted. It just is. And if I'm going to put my faith and my trust in anybody, it's going to be him.
Yeah.
And if I can do anything for the world, it's through him.
So we can't find in creation what only Creator can provide.
Yeah.
And what I think is so beautiful is that, all throughout your life, and I'm very sorry that you had to deal with that. I really like the story is men not being men, being passive, pathetic excuses, not protectors. When you didn't experience someone loving you and seeking after you and protecting you. But what I find in that story of God putting the woman in the gas station, the alcohol not being there, the money coming through, is that you had a God that was seeking your protection. Like he was caring about you. He was making sure you were okay. He was hearing you and being proactive.
Yeah.
And what you couldn't find in earthly father.
Him showing up for me there was the equivalent of him stopping me from touching that glass, him stopping those pills from touching my mouth, him knocking at the door and stopping that razor. It was the equivalent of all those times I needed somebody to say, stop, I want you here. And then just like the way that he has used me now, I sing in the choir now. I don't remember singing before I got saved. I don't remember singing.
Yeah.
I don't know that I did. But I can't imagine not now. I can't imagine not worshiping now. Like, I just can't imagine what my life would be like without that, without this song in my heart. And when I sing and when I worship, I close my eyes and it's just him.
So beautiful.
Like, I can't imagine. I'm just absolutely 100% unrecognizable to who I used to be. And that's what I asked him for.
Everything.
I asked him for everything. That's what he did.
Delivered.
That's what he did.
Such a beautiful story, Adrienne. So as we close out, to the 23-year-old that's in the gas station looking now, and it's not that woman that helped you, it's you. What do you tell to you in that gas station? If you could go back, and not even that point, maybe it's before, to the little girl jumping on the glass, to the little girl listening to this, to the single mom listening to it, to the young man that's being abused at home. What's the message you would have heard then that you could give them now?
I wish I could say that there was one message. I really needed to know that God was who I needed. That God was going to be what fixed me. But I needed to know that it wasn't my fault. I needed to know that it wasn't always going to be bad. And then that I could trust him. Like, I needed to know that. There's so many different points that the story kept changing, and it just kept getting worse and worse. I just needed something. I needed hope along the way. I don't know that there's one word to give somebody hope. If I could give it, if it was just that easy to give somebody hope for one more, like, don't give up. Like, one more time, don't give up. Like, whatever that word would be.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. Because
persevere.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, and I think one of the things we can learn from your story is that you had no evidence of God in your life, no person to talk to you, and for us Christians that are going out living life, like, to the 9-year-old girl that we see at church, or not at church, if you see it out and about that you think is just normal, like, you just don't know how people are hurting. And you don't know how, you're just letting them know that there's a God. that there's someone that's out searching for protecting them, that wants good for them.
Those neighbors that I had said that we call
The Holies. Wow.
Rolling Holies. There you go.
That's the name of this podcast.
Their parents told me I couldn't be friends with them anymore because I was a bad influence. I might have been a bad influence, but I mean, that was my life. But I don't remember them ever telling me about God. I don't ever want to miss that opportunity. When somebody rolls up to my house and they got a mouth and I want to throat punch them, I'm still going to tell them about God.
I think you did this past couple months ago.
Like, I wish that somebody had told me. That was one of the things. When I found out about God and how great he was, it was just like, if this God is so good, if he's so great, how come nobody's ever told me about him before? Like, why am I coming in late to the game?
Yeah, there's an atheist that said, if the God does exist, and you're a Christian that don't share your faith, like how much you have to hate someone to not tell them about God.
Yeah,
about Jesus, about his selfless sacrifice, and and you can go to church. Those people were holy because they went to church. What makes you holy is only believing in the precious sacrifice of Jesus. But true holiness is being like God, and God is near the brokenhearted. And if we're not near the brokenhearted, then how can you ever say we're anything like Christ?
Yeah. I think that's what's been beneficial about working now as the sponsor, is because being able to tell that story to her, and even like she's not a week out of like being completely sober, and she's ready to tell her story to somebody else.
Yeah.
To tell somebody else what God did for her, and I'm like, do it. Do it.
You don't know how to say it? Do it anyway.
You don't have to wait. You don't have to have a year under your belt. You don't have to do anything. You could be high and God's working in your life. You already know that something needs to change. Like, you don't have to be perfect.
Start where you're at.
He didn't take us perfect. He loves us broken. He likes the broken ones more.
And he does the sanctifying. Yeah. He bears the fruit. Yeah. You just got to get close to him.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Adrienne, thank you. Before we close, that church that you were at the altar at, what was that church?
Temple.
And where do you work at now?
Temple.
And that's why we're able to overcome. Is that we fall down at the altar and say, God, I don't know what I need. I'll just take everything.
Oh, yeah.
And you surrender. And he says, he saw you coming into that church, knowing that you were going to lead a campus of that church with your husband, and change hundreds of lives. And it just started with, I don't know anything, but I can just change. If you could just change everything. And for the person that's out there that doesn't know what to do with Jesus, just come like Adrienne.
Give him everything.
And then he'll change everything and give you purpose in a world that doesn't want to have purpose. For all the stuff you went through, I'm very sorry. But for the people that you impact on a daily basis, I'm so thankful that we have a God that doesn't say, I'm just going to act like pain doesn't exist. What Satan meant for evil, God
for good.
He's using you like crazy. So thank you for being the witness you are and influencing lives the way that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.